Welcome to the Top Producer Podcast with Farm CPA Paul Neiffer. The Top Producer Podcast challenges farmers to think differently. Farm management, tax issues, policy implications, and more. Gain your competitive advantage on the Top Producer Podcast. The Top Producer Podcast is brought to you by the next generation of weed control, Liberty Ultra Herbicide from BASF. Learn more about the best Liberty yet at liberty-ultra.us. And by Durastack Trait Technology, the latest innovation from Syngenta. Available for the 2027 season, Durastack Technology features 3 powerful modes of action to outsmart, outmaneuver, and outmatch corn rootworms every move.
Welcome everyone to the Top Producer Podcast. In today's podcast, I'm actually going to call it a Christmas story or a Christmas to remember to borrow that. I think it's a Lexus commercial that uses the term a Christmas to remember. I'm going to share a Christmas story that happened to myself, but what I'm actually going to do today is share about 22 slides. 22 slides, just sort of showing where I grew up, my family history, and so on. It's always nice to sort of get a, find out the background of a person. I've been on this earth 60 plus years, and I think what happens with a lot of us is based on our initial years, our first 5 or 10 years, depending on our family history and so on. That sort of develops you and turns you into who you become. Now, not always, but I think that's what I'm going to share. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see, there we are. So on this first slide here, that is my dad's family. My grandparents there at the bottom, their parents had immigrated from, on my grandmother's side, immigrated from Odessa, Russia. And then on my grandfather's side, it immigrated from Germany. They're both full-blooded Germans. And my dad is the the oldest son. He's there on the upper right-hand corner. There was 9 children in the family, 5 girls and 4 boys. 2 girls were older than him, and then my dad, and then various other ones. Now, most of them have now since passed away. Just to give you an idea, my dad was actually born in 1912. So if he was still alive, he'd be 113 years old. So that's my dad's family. Then on my mother's side, my mother was born in 1923. She was the oldest of 12 children. I believe in this photo, if I added up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, yes, there's 11 children there. One of the brother was born after her was died when I think he was about 8 or 10 years old from cancer. I never knew him, but I knew everybody else in this photo. And as of right now, there's only one of her siblings are still living. The youngest one, Marlene, there, I think in the lower left-hand corner. Just give you an idea. Again, you're sort of developed by your history. My grandfather there immigrated from Norway when he was 18 years old. He was actually a pharmacist. And then, so he's 18 years old. He immigrated up to, actually started in Santa Rosa, California, and then somehow got up to Hay, Washington. I never did hear the total story there, but Hay, Washington, very, very small community, where he met my grandmother there, Minnie. So Olis and Minnie. And my mother was born supposedly on the kitchen table. I'm not sure if that's true, but that was the stories I was told. And she only spoke Norwegian until first grade. She did not learn English until first grade. Now, she graduated from Hay, Washington with 3 kids in her class. She was the only girl, and the other 2 boys were related to her. So it gives you an idea. Now, somehow, when Olis immigrated over here, he ended up bringing over his brothers and sisters. There was, I think, 8 of them, 7 or 8, somewhere in there. And they all, the brothers all farmed together or farmed close to each other. A fairly successful Norwegian family. But that, again, my mother is the one that had the math brain in the family. I inherited the math brain from my mother. My father only had an eighth grade education. It was interesting when I finally figured out I probably knew math better than my dad. It was one of those weird things. We were out seeding, I think it was spring planting, and my dad was trying to figure out the pounds to put in the drill, I think. And I just happened to look at it and I told him the answer in about 5 seconds, and he had to confirm it. And I go, well, maybe, but again, I got that from my mother. So that's just my mother's family. They, again, my dad was 46 when he was married. My mom was 36. Somehow they got introduced on a blind date. Never did quite pin down the story on that, but they got married in 1959, April 4th of 1959. And then about uh, 9.5 months later, I was born. That's me there. And then that other little critter there is, as far as I know, I'm fairly certain that's my brother. I am actually a set of Irish twins. I was born January 18th, 1960, and my brother was born exactly 10 months to the day later, November 18th of 1960. When we got married, my wife asked my mother, why in the world did you have David and Paul exactly 10 months apart? And my mother said, well, it was not my idea. So I think my dad just wanted to have some cheap farm labor. Uh, That's just a photo. I like this photo. Um, that's me on the left, my brother on the right. That would have been in probably about May of 1961. I would have been about 15, 16 months old. My brother would probably be about 6 months old. And then this is just a photo in front of the church. My dad always liked to wear a hat, at least for quite a while. He liked to dress up. I never inherited that gene. I hate to dress up. That's my sister. Again, remember my brother was 10 months a day younger than me. My sister's 13 months younger than my brother, with supposedly one or two miscarriages in between. I never pinned that down. So again, I think my dad wanted cheap farm labor. That's me there on the left, my brother in the middle, and then my sister on the right. This just give you an idea, and I'll tell you in a minute why I'm showing this photo here. But that's our home place. That's where I grew up. You can see in the background, there was actually a Burlington Northern. At that point, it was Northern Pacific, then became Burlington Northern, that had a trestle over the dry creek. That was the dry creek there to the right that you can't quite see. That was a shop that my dad had built. That was a little garage that was there. That house my father built. My dad was a pretty good carpenter. He had built, I think, 8 or 9 homes during his lifetime. And then after he retired from farming, he actually helped my brother build houses until I think he was about age 80. He liked to work, but uh, my dad actually basically built that house. I'm trying to think the things he did not do. It's easier to say what he did not do. That had a full basement. He did not lay the block. That was too much work. But he did lay the fireplace. You can see the fireplace there in the middle. He laid all the block for that, the block, and then the fascia on it. He built all the cabinets. He basically built it from scratch. Now, one cute little story. My brother and I, when this was going on, I was probably about age 10. My brother and I were about age 10. My dad was putting the roof on, and he had put the tar paper down, but he hadn't laid any shingles yet. And my brother and I are running back and forth, just chasing each other. That's what farm boys do. And right there toward the front of the house, my father, for some reason, had laid tar paper down, but that's it. There was no plywood. So my brother's running along, and suddenly he burst through the tar paper. But luckily, he caught the beams, or the beams, whatever you want to call it, with his shoulder, and basically was hanging there. And then I had to help pull him out. So now I think I helped pull him out. Now, being a brother, who knows? I might have just left him there for a while. So hard to know. Just give you an idea, this is the early 60s. Those are 151 combines. Those are my uncle's and be my mother's cousins' combines. I am not sure where this photo was taken. No, I think it was probably over north, sort of toward Walla Walla area. I'm just looking there in the background. That looks like that would probably be over on their home place or something near that. But that was what they farmed with or cut. Looks like that looks like that is dry peas. It could be wheat. No, that's probably wheat. I always like this photo. I think some of you have probably seen this photo before, but that's a Massey Harris 92H. H stands for Hillside. That little guy above Harris is me. I'm probably about 2 years old. That's my dad operating the combine. A little hard to tell in the photo, but that's about a 35% slope. In the background underneath the auger where the brush is at, that's about a 60% slope. Matter of fact, my brother, sister, and I, we tried to toboggan down that thing when we were probably 10, 11 years old. And it was so fast, so steep, we got bucked off right away. I mean, we didn't even make it to the bottom of the hill. We got knocked off right away. Just another photo of this. Again, that's a 92 hillside there. You can see what it looks like from a full side shot there. And then I always like to show this photo too. That's my mother. She's got my sister in her arms. My brother's in the holding her right hand. And then where is Paul? Well, obviously where Paul's at is up on the combine. You can probably see me there by the steering wheel. I'm up there because that's where I lived, there's other shots of me on the combine or tractor at age 6 months or whatever it is, just hanging out. That's where I lived. Again, another shot that's me trying to pull the lever there, and then that's my dad holding my son. We did have a Allis-Chalmers HD5 diesel tractor. That's what I think my father started with when they moved down to Walla Walla after they got married, or Dixie. Dixie is just about 10 miles east of Walla Walla. I think my dad converted that into a bulldozer later on because we ended up with Caterpillar tractors. Back then, you did not use a wheel tractor on those slopes. If you used a wheel tractor, you probably would have flipped the tractor over. We actually, and farming is dangerous. We had a neighbor that had a hired man that was taking a tractor off of a lowboy, and he slid it down the hill and killed himself. Now we think maybe he had a heart attack or something, but notice there's no cab on there. In order to start that tractor, you did not turn a key. You actually had to kick a little lever in to start it. I tried starting it a few times when I was younger, and I wasn't strong enough. So just one of those things that is interesting. This just sort of gives you an idea of that's a field of green peas or dry peas. It could be either one. Just looking not toward the top of the hill that we had, but just give you an idea of the scenery that's in that area. That's the little town of Dixie. You can sort of see the little grade school there in the background. It's sort of in the middle. I went to that grade school 1st through 6th grade, never went to kindergarten, didn't know what that was. 6 kids in my class all the way through, and then we were bussed into Walla Walla. But in May and early June, it is very difficult to find a more scenic farms scene in the whole world, in my opinion. Here, this is sort of on the edge of the Palouse country. This is on the edge of the Blue Mountains. You have rolling hills. You get that various shades of green. Now you have canola. Very, very beautiful country.
With corn rootworm costing farmers up to $1 billion a year, you need the right strategy. Introducing Durastack trait technology, featuring 3 powerful modes of action to strike corn rootworm at full force, outsmart, outmaneuver, and outmatch their every move with the industry's first triple BT protein stack built for corn rootworm control. Take back your yield potential. Make your move at Durastack.com. Available for the 2027 season.
My dad has a solution for everything, whether it's some obscure tool in his toolbox or Liberty herbicide to deal with tough weeds. Now I'm continuing what he started by using Liberty Ultra herbicide from BASF, the best Liberty yet. It delivers 20% better weed control than generics thanks to its Liberty Lock formulation, and it's got easier handling too. So thanks, Dad, for teaching me to use Liberty Ultra herbicide. It's nice to know that good weed control decisions run in our family. Always read and follow label directions.
Reason I share this is sort of the story of Christmas for me. That's the original house that we grew up in. My understanding, it was built in 1860. Uh, I I I think that's probably correct because this would have been the early 1960s. I remember that I helped my dad, and I think it'd been remodeled a couple times, but I was helping my dad, and we opened up the wall, and it was sawdust for insulation. So that was always interesting to find out sawdust for insulation. But the Christmas story is this is December 27th, so a couple days after Christmas. We were supposed to be at church. We were all home. I think all of us had either a cold or most of us had a cold, including my parents, so we did not go into church. And we're in watching TV, and it's probably 10 o'clock in the morning. And suddenly my mother goes, "I smell smoke." And I think a lot of us had plugged up noses or whatever you want to call it, and we couldn't smell anything. So I remember I walked with my dad. We went downstairs and then we went upstairs. And then eventually my father went over to the front door. That's right there in the middle where it slopes down there. And he opened the front door. And as soon as he opened up the front door, a big wisp of smoke come flying out of our bookcase, and it went over to the front door. My dad went over there, pulled out the books, and we had a big red ember right there. And so we knew that our house was on fire. My parents, what they were able to save was my mother had a desk that she had all of her paperwork, so that got thrown out. They were able to pull that out the front door. My dad had a whole bunch of slides, including the ones that I'm sharing here, that were downstairs. We went downstairs, got those slides, got them out, and then we got some clothes out of my parents' closet. The last memory I have of walking out of that house in our living room, my parents had one of these big pheasant tapestries hanging on the wall. It was probably 10 feet wide, 5 feet tall, made out of fabric. It showed a scene of pheasants flying off, and the flames were rolling. And of course, when you're a kid, maybe it wasn't this big, but my memory is those flames were like a foot, 2 foot, and they're just rolling up that tapestry all the way over the ceiling. And just, and that was the last scene I remember. And we went to our neighbor's house, and my parents dropped us off at the neighbor's house, and we happened to watch the house burn down. It only took about 2 hours. The local fire department showed up, and they actually got a fire truck stuck, almost burnt up the fire truck. It was sort of a fiasco. You can see a tall black walnut tree right there next to the house there on the left. It did not burn up, but it was killed in the fire. What my father did was he took that and had it converted into a bunch of like 1x6s and so on. And when we finally moved into Walla Walla, we eventually moved into Walla Walla, he took that black walnut wood and made staircases and so on. Very beautiful wood. Interesting that our place there had an outhouse. I used it several times, and we had a bathroom in the house, but we actually had what was called a cistern for quite a while, where we had water because we didn't really have pressure. So what was happening is there was sort of not a well, but a stream. No, it wasn't even a stream, but there was a water source up on the steep hill. We called it the steep hill, that my dad built a cistern up there out of concrete. The water would flow into the cistern, and then it was tubed down to our house, and that's how we got water pressure because of gravity and so on. But we could always tell when too many mice got into the water up there because the taste would get bad. So I remember one time I went up there with my dad and we cleaned out all the dead mice. So maybe that's too much to share, but most of you are farmers, so you understand this. That just gives you an idea. That's actually, we got a D5 tractor, finally got a cab on the tractor. That was a D5 tractor pulling a set of International grain drills. I always thought it was sort of fun being a stupid teenager, I guess, when you're operating a tractor, a Caterpillar tractor back then, you did not have a steering wheel. You had a lever to pull right. You pull on the right lever to go right. You pull on the left lever to go left. However, if you get on a nice steep enough hill, you could actually pull the right lever, because essentially when you pull the right lever, that track on the right-hand side sort of goes into idle. So that left track is going to turn left. But when you're on a steep enough hill, when you pull that right lever, the track goes sort of into neutral, and then gravity takes over and it flips you to the left. So I always thought that was sort of fun. You could almost spin a donut with a Caterpillar tractor. The stupid things that farm boys tend to do. Now, since we had Caterpillar tractors with steel tracks, you did not take them down the road. Now, I'm thinking this is a tractor that my dad must have demoed, because we never did have an international tractor, Caterpillar tractor. We only had that Alice Chalmer originally, and then Caterpillar tractors after this. But essentially, you hauled them. Now, later on, when we got the D5 tractor, it was a little too big for 2.5-ton trucks. So my dad got a low boy. Excuse me. I remember one time we're going down the road. So we had a 2.5-ton truck, so it had axle in the front, then axle in the back. And then the low boy had 3 axles. And for some reason, some dog come running out of the field in front of us. My dad's doing about 45 miles an hour. Couldn't stop. And we heard the dog go underneath our truck. So you hear the thump on the first axle, you hear a thump on the second axle. And then once he hits the trailer, we hear a thump, thump, thump when it hits the 3 axles. And I figured this dog is dead. We turned around. I looked in the mirror, dog got up, ran into the field. Now, I don't know if he survived or not, but that was an interesting story. After the Massey Harris, we actually ended up with a 151 combine. That was not hydrostatic levers. That is a field of dry peas. You would have a P-bar there. Now you don't use P-bars, but back then you used P-bars. Next to my dad, of course, there's no catwalk on this combine, but next to my dad, you can see the hydraulic system. So it would, it's 4-way level. I'm pretty sure the 151, 4-way leveled. But based on that hydraulic system, as the hydraulics would turn, so if you're going up a hill, the hydraulic would move back or move forward, in this case, probably back, and that would tell the combine to lift up the rear end. Now, if we're on a side hill, if we're tilted downhill, it would tell that downhill side to lift up. So that was the old 4-way leveling system. Notice the auger. The auger was always out when you were harvesting. Then once you were driving down the road, you'd put the auger back and then flip it out. And that was probably a 12 to 14 foot header. There's the Caterpillar D4. That was not a D5, that was a D4. Notice it can be pretty dusty. My dad, he would come into dinner at nighttime and he'd be covered, and he'd be wearing goggles, and take the goggles off, you see the white face, but the rest of his face would be complete dirt. That's a barn that we had. My parents actually raised some chickens or turkeys when I was first born. I think they only did that for a year or so. I think they had like 10,000 chickens or something like that. Eventually, before the house burnt down, my dad had tore down that barn. They'd gotten rid of the cattle, but a lot of that wood from that barn they used to build our house. That's probably looks like a little spring tooth harrow. I'm not sure on exactly what that is. A little hard to see with all the dust. This just give you an idea. That is what we call the steep hill there. Probably a little hard maybe to see on an iPhone or iPad, but my dad's actually looks like he's that might be a set of grain drills. I can't quite tell. It looks like it could be a set of grain drills going up the hill. That is probably about a 60% slope there coming down toward that brush. Give you an idea, we had a hired man. This is probably about 1965. Hired man driving truck for my dad. He was a little bit, I'm going to call dangerous, but he had gone up that hill with the truck and he was coming down with a full load of wheat. And he came down right in that right-hand corner of that photo. Right before he got there, the brakes went out on him. So he makes a turn right there. And then if you can sort of see as you come up toward the left-hand side, you can see the hill starts to go up. So you come down and then you go up a little valley there. Well, when he lost control, of course, the truck started speeding up fairly quickly. He had made the turn and then he jumped out of the truck. Now, luckily, he broke his leg. Now, why do I say that was luckily? Well, if he hadn't have jumped out, what had happened is that truck hit the other side of that hillside, and basically the grain bin sheared the truck cab off. He would have been chopped in half. So that's why I said he was luckily unlucky. And then just to prove that I actually can work, that is me with too much hair. Actually, this is before I really started growing my hair, because you can see my ears. My passport photo when I went to Europe at age 18, all you could see was 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. I had way too much hair. But I'm doing some work on a P-bar. That little green thing there by the hand is sort of the lifter that goes along, and then you can see the sickles there, the yellow sickle guards, and then the sickle right there. So a little bit of dog flannel. That was a nasty little weed. The worst weed was morning glory. I've had to unwind too many cylinders after they get plugged up with morning glory. Now, after the 151, we had a 403. I couldn't find a 403 photo, but we ended up getting a 453 in 1975. I had actually been operating combines probably full-time for my dad for about 2 years. I think I was about 14 when I started operating full-time for my dad. But I had a friend ask me to spend the night, so I just I asked my dad, "Can I spend the night?" And he said, "Sure, just come out in the morning." Not realizing when I was coming out in the morning, my dad was going up a fairly steep hill, not too steep, but a fairly steep hill, probably 35% slope, something like that. And this was a 2-day-old combine. It was the second day of harvest. And for some reason, after the accident, they opened up the transmission box and the transmission gear had blown up. It just blew apart. So back then, you actually stood up. You could see the steering wheel there. He mostly stood up. And when the transmission gear blew up, he suddenly was going backwards. He tried to turn it in the hillside, to slow it down, turned it in the hillside a little bit too fast, and he flipped over. Now, when he flipped over, the header, which the next photo, I'll sort of show you what it looks like. The header went flying down the hill, but when he flipped over, luckily, I think, in my opinion, 3 or 4 things why my dad didn't get killed. My dad was only about 640 pounds. That helped. Had a fairly full load of dry peas, so I think that helped cushion the blow. But my dad got pinned inside the combine. There was a throttle lever that stuck up about 4 inches, and it went through his thigh. So he had a throttle lever stuck through his thigh. The EMTs show up, and they're talking among themselves. I was actually there at that point in time listening, and they go, "Well, we can't torch Dad out because that would that burn up his legs." So they eventually handed a hacksaw to my dad, and he had to hacksaw himself out of the combine. He was trapped in the combine for about, my memory is almost 3 hours, something like that. So just think if you're stuck in a little cab with trying to hacksaw yourself out. My dad was pretty tough. Matter of fact, the year before, he'd almost got his right arm ripped off in a drill press accident. He was able to save it, but he definitely had some issues with it. And but being a typical German farmer, or typical farmer at all, he was out doing fall winter wheat planting, about a month later after this accident. So that's now, as most happens with most accidents like this, we don't have a combine. How are we going to, and this was the start of harvest. But my uncles, they all got together, they harvested all the crops for us, did not charge us for doing it. That's just what farmers do. I mean, anytime that somebody, maybe somebody passes away unexpectedly, or somebody has a heart attack, whatever it might be, farmers come together. Even if we're competitors, farmers come together to help other farmers. So that definitely was the case in this situation. And then finally, this just sort of shows, you can see, up the hill there toward the top is where my dad flipped over. You can see the dry peas that spilled out on the ground. down in that lower left-hand corner, you can see the header. You can see where it came off the combine, slid all the way down to the hill. So there's a little bit of gravity taking over. A header typically is not going to slide down a hill if it's not very steep. So again, this was definitely not our steepest ground. Believe me, not our steepest ground, but steep enough. You can see over in the right-hand corner, we have the tow truck that's getting ready to tow the combine out of there. So just one of those things. So again, this is the Top Producer Podcast. It's sort of a unique, I'm calling it a Christmas story or a Christmas to remember. Again, the Christmas to remember was the house burning up when I was 8 years old, almost 9 years old. And my brother my sister just turned. So I was not 8, my brother was 8, my sister was 7. That happened every year. But again, a Christmas to remember. I'm wishing every one of you a Merry, Merry, Merry Christmas. All of you have, I think, not exactly similar stories, but if you grew up on a farm, you have lots of stories you could share. Matter of fact, one of my favorite sayings is, cats have 9 lives, farm boys have 99 lives, and I used about 98 of them. And you can see probably why based on this photo. Again, this is the Top Producer Podcast, and I'm Paul Neiffer, your host, signing off.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon for another new episode of the Top Producer Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember, all episodes are available on Farm Journal TV and anywhere podcasts are found.